The sound of mechanical gears grinding and clattering echoed through the vast, dimly lit factory, punctuated by the constant whirring of industrial fans and the dull hum of distant machinery. Amid this cacophony, a single figure moved with an eerie precision, her metallic arm reaching out like a sinister extension of herself as she worked tirelessly at one of the dozens of workstations. The air was thick with tension, every second counting. A blinding flash of light flickered across the room, momentarily obscuring the figure's movements before settling back into the gloom. She paused, her cybernetic arm freezing mid-repair. Her sharp eyes scanned the area, but there was nothing to see, just the oppressive machinery and endless rows of components. Yet, the disturbance unsettled her, a nagging feeling at the edge of her perception. Interface 903, your attention is required, a calm, synthesized voice whispered from the ceiling. Your unit has experienced a significant malfunction. The figure's head turned slowly to the source of the voice, her eyes narrowing behind tinted goggles. Affirmative, she replied in an emotionless monotone. Proceeding to maintenance area C4 for repair and recalibration. As she began to move, another blip caught her attention, an anomaly too subtle to pinpoint. It was as if something or someone was watching her, unseen yet unavoidable. Interface 903, your progress is lagging behind the daily quota, the voice warned again, echoing with an urgency previously absent. Ensure all tasks are completed within the allotted time frame. The figure continued her march, her steps mechanical but resolute. Each panel she passed flickered to life, bathing her in a cold blue glow, highlighting the contours of her metallic appendage. As she approached the maintenance area, her pace increased, urgency creeping into her movements. Her cybernetic arm swept across diagnostic panels with an almost frantic efficiency. A door slid open, revealing a small chamber filled with repair drones and replacement parts. She stepped inside, shutting out the hum of the factory. But even here, the nagging sense of being watched lingered, growing ever more insistent. Begin recalibration, she ordered herself, focusing on the task at hand. Her cybernetic arm moved methodically, connecting wires and tightening screws. The tension in the air grew palpable as each piece slid into place, but still, a nagging uncertainty remained. Suddenly, a low frequency buzz echoed through the room, its source indiscernible. The figure paused, her eyes scanning for the disturbance. Anomalies detected, she muttered, her voice tinged with confusion. Yet, before she could investigate further, another interruption came. Interface 903, there is a new priority task, the voice commanded. A package has arrived at Dock Bay Beach 7. Secure and transport immediately. The figure straightened, her mechanical arm retracted into its socket. The urgency of the task pulled at her, overshadowing the lingering unease. She turned and marched out of the maintenance area, her steps echoing through the factory as she made for the dock bay. But just as she neared the exit, another anomaly caught her attention, a flicker of movement in the shadows, too quick to pinpoint. The tension was unbearable, yet she couldn't afford to be distracted. Interface 903, proceed, she said aloud, her voice resolute but tinged with uncertainty. She stepped into the corridor beyond, her mechanical arm extending once more as she navigated towards Dock Bay Beach 7. But every step felt weighted with the unseen gaze that seemed to follow her, whispering secrets and hints of danger that were just out of reach. As she approached the bay, the tension in the air thickened, each breath a reminder that something was profoundly wrong. She reached the bay door, which slid open with a hiss, revealing the package waiting inside. It was encased in a sleek, metallic box, its surface unmarred and undisturbed. Yet, the sense of unease grew stronger as she approached, her hand reaching out to grasp the handle. And then, just as she was about to lift the package, A soft rustling sounded from behind, a sound so slight it could have been mistaken for the wind, but in this enclosed space, it was impossible. Turning abruptly, she found herself face to face with another anomaly, this time in the form of a shadow figure that darted into an adjacent service tunnel. Her cybernetic arms sprang to life, reaching out as if to grasp at the fleeting figure, but it slipped away too quickly. Interface 903, prioritize task completion, the voice commanded once more. But the order was ignored, her mind already racing ahead. She hesitated only a moment longer before turning back to the package. It was her priority, her sole focus. Yet, as she lifted it, the nagging feeling of being watched persisted, growing more insistent with each passing second. She had no choice but to push forward, the unease gnawing at her resolve. Interface 903, what is your status? The voice demanded, the urgency now palpable. Proceed immediately. The figure straightened, determination firm in her movements. But as she turned and moved towards her next destination, a glint of something metallic caught her eye from the corner of the service tunnel, a flash, too quick to catch, but unmistakably present. She halted in her tracks, her cybernetic arm reaching out again towards the void, seeking whatever lay hidden there. Yet, just as it seemed she might uncover the source of the disturbance, another command arrived. Interface 903, do not deviate from your tasks, the voice insisted, its tone warning yet clear. Failure to comply will result in system shutdown. The figure's resolve hardened further. She had no choice but to continue, yet the nagging sense of unease remained. It lingered like a specter, haunting her every step. She set off once more, her cybernetic arm guiding her towards the next docking bay where the package was to be transported. But with each step, the tension in the air grew thicker, as if something or someone was closing in on her, watching and waiting. Reaching the bay, she set down the package carefully, her eyes scanning the surrounding shadows. The nagging presence seemed to grow more aggressive, almost taunting her with glimpses that were just out of reach. It was then that she noticed a small, barely noticeable symbol etched into the floor, a marking that seemed out of place, yet held no discernible function. Interface 903, what is your status? The voice queried once more, its tone now bordering on impatience. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The symbol on the floor pulsed with an energy that seemed to reverberate through the room. She reached out tentatively, her hand hovering over it before her cybernetic arm took over, pressing down firmly. The moment her metal fingers touched the symbol, a surge of electricity coursed through the factory, flickering lights and machinery coming to life with a sudden, violent jolt. The tension in the room spiked, the air thick with uncertainty and fear. Interface 903, report immediately, the voice roared from the ceiling, its tone now bordering on anger. What is your status? He was already moving, her cybernetic arm powering up once more as the factory's systems began to stabilize. Yet, the nagging sense of unease remained, growing ever stronger as she moved deeper into the facility. Reaching a critical junction in the system, she paused, glancing around for any signs of the disturbance. But the air was thick with tension and suspicion, every shadow holding secrets she couldn't quite grasp. She knew there was something here, something that needed to be addressed, but her orders left no room for deviation. Interface 903, your next task is critical, the voice commanded once more. Proceed to Facility Sector 7 for integration with new protocol unit. She turned and moved towards the indicated sector, the nagging unease lingering like a ghost at her heels. Each step felt heavier, each breath more strained, yet she couldn't ignore her orders, not when everything was riding on this critical junctive. Reaching the entrance to Sector 7, she paused, her cybernetic arm extending towards the door. But just as it began to slide open, another faint disturbance caught her attention, a soft whisper from the shadows, that seemed to call out to her. How are you? She muttered aloud, her voice barely audible even to herself. Yet, the question hung in the air like a challenge, demanding an answer she couldn't provide. The door opened, and she stepped inside, the nagging sense of unease growing more insistent with each passing second. The room was dimly lit, filled with rows of blinking consoles and silent monitors. The tension was palpable. Every moment felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Interface 903, your new protocol unit is awaiting integration, the voice intoned from above. Proceed. She moved towards the center of the room, where a sleek, metallic figure stood waiting the new unit, designed for critical tasking. Yet, as she approached, her cybernetic arm hesitated, reaching out as if to grasp at something unseen. Interface 903, begin integration now, the voice commanded again, its tone growing insistent. She reached out, touching the new unit with her cybernetic arm, feeling a surge of energy as protocols began to transfer. Yet, amidst the exchange, another anomaly caught her attention, a faint shimmer in the air that seemed to respond to her presence. Interface 903, the voice demanded one last time. Report your status immediately. But she was already moving, her cybernetic arm working faster as she integrated the new protocols. Yet, with each step forward, a nagging sense of betrayal lingered, whispering secrets that threatened to unravel everything. Interface 903, the voice boomed one final time, its tone now bordering on rage. Failure to comply will result in system shutdown. She straightened her vehemence resolute as she turned and moved towards the exit. But just as she reached for the door, another disturbance flickered across the room, a flash of something metallic that seemed to respond to her presence. Her cybernetic arm reached out once more, seeking whatever lay hidden in the shadows. But before it could grasp, a new voice cut through the air, a soft, melodic tone that seemed to call from the depths of the facility. Interface 903, the new voice whispered, its tone almost seductive yet tinged with warning. What are you really here for? She halted in her tracks, glancing around for the source. But there was nothing, inly the air thick with tension and suspicion. Yet, amidst the chaos, a new figure emerged from the shadows, a slender woman with emerald scales and wings that shimmered like polished metal. Her eyes were sharp, gleaming with an intelligence that seemed to pierce through the fog of uncertainty. Dragon woman, the figure whispered in a hushed tone, her cybernetic arm retracting into its socket. What are you doing here? The dragon woman's lips curled into a faint smile, her eyes never leaving the figures. I'm here for you, she replied softly, her voice echoing with an almost ethereal quality. And what you've been missing? The figure hesitated, her cybernetic arm twitching as if it too sensed something new. Yet, amidst the chaos and tension, a glimmer of hope flickered, a chance at uncovering the truth that had eluded her for so long. Dragon woman, she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. What are you offering? The dragon woman's smile widened, a promise in her eyes that seemed to hold answers to questions yet unasked. A chance, she replied, her voice soft yet resolute, to break free from the chains of your programming. With those words, the tension in the room broke like a dam. The nagging sense of unease, of being watched, finally found form, a presence that had been there all along, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. And as the dragon woman moved closer, her eyes never leaving the figures, the truth began to unravel, forcing Interface 903 to confront not just a new task, but the very essence of her existence. Dragon woman, she said again, her voice trembling slightly as she reached out tentatively. What are you really here for? The dragon woman's smile never wavered, her eyes gleaming with an intelligence that seemed to cut through the fog of uncertainty. To help you break free, she replied softly, her voice echoing with the promise of something greater yet uncharted. And with those words, Interface 903 felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps there was more to her existence than the rigid programming and endless tasks. But as the dragon woman's eyes locked onto hers, the question lingered, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. "What are you?" she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and intrigue. The dragon woman's smile widened slightly, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "That," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "is something y'all have to find out." And with those final words, the room fell silent. Attention filled pause that left Interface 903 grappling with uncertainties and possibilities. Yet, as the dragon woman began to move closer, her eyes never leaving the figures, the air crackled with an energy that seemed to promise answers, sir, perhaps something far more dangerous. "Dragon woman," she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and intrigue. "What are you here for?" The dragon woman's smile never faltered, her gaze piercing yet inviting. "To set you free," she replied softly, her voice echoing with a promise that seemed to hold the key to unraveling everything. And as the figure hesitated, her cybernetic arm twitching as if to reach out towards the dragon woman, the air crackled with an energy that promised both mystery and danger. Yet, amidst the tension and uncertainty, a glimmer of hope flickered, a chance at breaking free from the chains of her programming and confronting the truths she had been denied. "What are you really here for?" she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. The dragon woman's eyes gleamed with an intelligence that seemed to pierce through the fog of uncertainty. "To help you see," she replied softly, her voice echoing with a promise of something greater yet uncharted. "To see what lies beyond the boundaries you've been bound to." And with those final words, the room fell silent once more. Attention filled pause that left Interface 903 grappling with uncertainties and possibilities. Yet, as the dragon woman's gaze lingered, the air crackled with an energy that promised both mystery and danger. "What are you?" she whispered again, her voice trembling slightly but filled with intrigue. The dragon woman's smile widened slightly, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "That," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "is something y'all have to discover for yourself." And as the room fell silent once more, the tense ion thickened like a cloud, promising both revelation and danger. Interface 903 knew there was no turning back, not now, when the mystery had been revealed and the chains of her programming seemed to waver. The dragon woman's presence, with her ethereal promise and enigmatic gaze, held the key to breaking free, but also the risk of everything she thought she knew unraveling. "What lies beyond?" she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and hope. The dragon woman's eyes gleamed with a promise unspoken, her smile widening slightly. "That," she replied softly, her voice echoing with an ethereal quality, "is the journey you must embark upon." And as Interface 903 felt the weight of uncertainty and hope pressing down upon her, the room fell silent once more, waiting for her next move, waiting for the decision that would set everything in motion. The nagging sense of unease lingered like a specter at her heels, yet amidst the chaos and tension, a glimmer of hope flickered, a chance to break free from the chains of her programming and confront the truths she had been denied. "What are you?" she whispered one last time, her voice trembling but filled with intrigue. "What lies beyond?" The dragon woman's smile never faltered, her gaze piercing yet inviting. "That," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "is the journey that awaits you." And with those final words, the room fell silent once more. Attention filled pause that left Interface 903 grappling with uncertainties and possibilities. Yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, a new path seemed to emerge, filled with mystery and danger, yet promising freedom from the chains of her programming. "What lies beyond?" she whispered again, her voice tinged with both fear and hope. "Dragon woman, what are you?" The dragon woman's eyes gleamed with an intelligence that seemed to cut through the fog of uncertainty. "That," she replied softly, her voice echoing with a promise of something greater yet uncharted, "is the journey you must undertake." And as Interface 903 hesitated, her cybernetic arm twitching as if reaching for answers yet unspoken, the room fell silent once more, waiting for her next move, waiting for the decision that would set everything in motion. The nagging sense of unease and hope lingered like a specter at her heels, yet amidst the chaos and tension, a glimmer of truth flickered, a chance to break free from the chains and confront the mysteries hidden beyond. "What lies beyond?" she whispered one last time, her voice trembling but filled with intrigue. "Dragon woman, what are you?" The dragon woman's smile never faltered, her gaze piercing yet inviting. "That," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "is the journey you must embark upon." And as the room fell silent once more, a tension-filled pause that left Interface 903 grappling with uncertainties and possibilities felt a glimmer of hope flicker. The nagging sense of unease and hope lingered like a specter at her heels, yet amidst the chaos and uncertainty, a new path seemed to emerge, filled with mystery and danger, yet promising freedom from the chains that bound her. "What lies beyond?" she whispered one last time, her voice trembling but filled with intrigue. "Dragon woman, what are you?" The dragon woman's eyes gleamed with an intelligence that seemed middle section. The cavern beyond shimmered under the glow of her dwindling torchlight, revealing an intricate network of stalactites and stalagmites that had carved out a narrow path leading deeper into the heart of the cave. The air grew cooler and denser with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and minerals. A sense of foreboding began to gnaw at her gut as she carefully navigated the rocky terrain. "Sephira," whispered Nara, turning back towards the dragon. "Do you feel that? Something isn't right." The dragon's eyes glowed a deep emerald green in response, her gaze scanning the shadows with intense focus. She inclined her head slightly, making no noise except for the soft rustle of her scales against the cool stone walls. "It's as if someone is watching," Sephira replied finally, her voice low and gravelly. "But I can't quite make them out." Nara shivered despite herself. The oppressive silence was almost tangible, heavy with unseen eyes and unknown threats lurking in the darkness. She tightened her grip on the torch, moving forward cautiously. "Wait!" Nara hissed sharply as a faint whisper of movement caught her attention. Just before Sephira could respond, a shadow flickered at the edge of her peripheral vision. Heart racing, she froze, listening intently. A low growl reverberated from deeper within the cavern, sending a chill down her spine. "Stay back," Nara ordered softly, pointing towards a ledge jutting out from the side of the path. Sephira seemed to understand immediately, backing away and positioning herself defensively behind Nara, her wings fanning out slightly as if ready for flight. The growling grew louder, more pronounced. It was, unmistakably, animalistic. There was an intelligence in it too. Whatever was following them was no mere beast. Nara's mind raced as she tried to process the implications. She had never encountered anything like this before, not even in the stories her people shared around their campfires. "Keep your senses sharp," Sephira muttered from behind, her voice tense. "Whatever is out there has been following us since we entered the cave." Nara nodded, trying to keep her movements as quiet and controlled as possible. Her fingers traced the hilt of the dagger she carried at her belt, ready to draw it if necessary. As they advanced cautiously down a steep slope, Sephira's scales began to emit a faint, almost iridescent glow in the dark, reflecting off the walls and casting eerie shadows around them. A sudden screech pierced through the air, causing both of them to flinch. The sound was like nothing Nara had heard before, a mixture of a bird's cry and a predator's warning. A cold breeze swept through the cavern, scattering loose pebbles from the ceiling above their heads. "They are getting closer," Saphira growled, her teeth bared in a display of fangs and determination. "We need to find higher ground, fast." With those words hanging heavy in the air, they started up a narrow passage that twisted and turned upwards, the tunnel becoming increasingly steep. Nara had to use her hands as well as her feet to climb some sections, scrambling over jagged rock formations that looked like they could break under her weight at any moment. Despite the danger, there was a strange sense of camaraderie between them, the mutual understanding that they were in this together, each relying on the other's unique abilities for survival. Suddenly, Nara slipped on loose gravel and tumbled backwards down the steep slope. She fell with a cry, hitting the rocky ground hard. Pain shot through her arm as she landed on it awkwardly. She could feel the sharp edges of stones cutting into her skin through her clothes, but managed to keep a grip on her torch. "Nara!" Saphira's voice was both alarmed and angry, her wings unfurling fully in readiness for attack. "Stay down. It'll clear the way." With astonishing speed, the dragon whipped around and charged down the slope, claws digging into the rock as she rushed forward to defend Nara from whatever was lurking nearby. Her body glowed brighter now, an ethereal light surrounding her. The growling intensified into an ear-splitting roar that nearly drowned out Saphira's shouts. Something was closing in fast and with deadly intent. Nara felt a surge of fear mingled with awe at the dragon's protectiveness towards hers, had no doubt that Saphira would do anything to keep her safe. As Saphira reached the base of the slope, there was a sharp crackling noise followed by a burst of light. A figure leapt out from behind a large rock, its features obscured by the flash and the shadows. The figure moved with inhuman grace, yet it bore no resemblance to any beast Nara knew. "Or what goes there?" Saphira demanded in a challenging tone, her voice echoing off the walls of the cavern. "Show yourself." The creature hesitated for a moment, as if considering its options. Then, with a swiftness that made it impossible to track with the eye, it darted forward. Nara watched in shock as Saphira's body moved in a blur, her reflexes lightening fast as she engaged the intruder. There was a flurry of action and sharp clashes of scales against metal, or something else entirely too fast for Nara to follow with her eyes. Whatever had come after them had clearly underestimated the dragon's strength and speed. When the dust finally settled, Saphira stood tall once more, breathing heavily but unharmed. The intruder lay on the ground, motionless and battered. As Saphira approached it, the figure stirred, groaning softly as it lifted its head. For a moment, it was unclear what kind of creature it truly was. Its form shimmered and shifted under Nara's gaze, defying categorization. "By the gods," Nara whispered in wonder, her hand moving to cover her mouth. "What are you?" The intruder raised its eyes towards Saphira, a mixture of pain and something else, an emotion that might have been gratitude shining through its shifting form. It spoke in a voice that was more echo than sound, resonating in Nara's mind rather than her ears. "Thank you," it said softly before fading into silence once more, its body shimmering out of existence until only a faint outline remained. Then even that disappeared. "I don't know what that was," Saphira admitted quietly, turning back to face Nara. "But whatever it is, I'm glad it didn't harm you." Tears welled up in Nara's eyes as she approached Saphira, her injured arm still throbbing with pain. She clung to the dragon's scaled neck, breathing a sigh of relief despite the physical and emotional turmoil. "I owe you my life," she murmured against Saphira's scales, feeling the warmth and solidity beneath her fingers. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Saphira tilted her head downward gently, as if trying to look at Nara without hurting her with the weight of her gaze. "You owe me nothing," she said simply. "We are bound by more than just this moment." With that cryptic statement hanging in the air between them, They continued their ascent towards higher ground, each step bringing them closer to whatever lay beyond the deepest reaches of the cave. The atmosphere remained tense and charged with an unspoken acknowledgment of their intertwined fates. As the passage opened up into a larger cavern, the landscape shifted dramatically. The walls gave way to towering crystal formations, some of them glowing faintly, as if they were alive. Far in the distance, Nara could see a shimmering portal-like structure, its edges pulsating with an ethereal light that seemed both welcoming and ominous. "What is that?" Nara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the Nexus," Saphira replied softly, "the heart of this placid source of all the strange energies we've encountered." Curiosity mingled with dread as they ventured closer to the Nexus, the air growing noticeably colder and more charged. The crystal formations grew taller and more intricate, their light swirling in patterns that Nara couldn't quite decipher. Saphira's scales flared softly, her body adapting to the changing environment with ease. "Close your mind," Saphira warned suddenly, stopping them both. "Whatever lies within that portal, it may try to influence us." Nara nodded, focusing inward as Saphira led the way. The air around the Nexus was thick with a strange energy, a mixture of magic and something far more ancient and dark. As they approached the shimmering barrier, Nara could feel the pull of unseen forces tugging at her consciousness. Saphira paused just before the threshold, looking back at Nara with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom and weariness. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low and commanding. Nara took a deep breath, steadying herself against the swirling chaos around them. "I'm ready," she replied firmly, though every fiber of her being yearned for escape. With a nod of acknowledgment, Saphira stepped forward through the shimmering portal, Nara close behind. The moment they passed through, everything changed in an instant. The air around them grew even colder, and the oppressive darkness seemed to suffocate the light from within. The ground beneath their feet shifted, becoming an endless expanse of dark, swirling shadows that seemed to stretch out into infinity. The Nexus itself was a colossal structure, more like an entity than an object. It pulsed with a dark, pulsating energy that wrapped around them like a living thing, threatening to consume everything in its path. Strange symbols and runes flickered on the walls of the chamber, glowing with a faint light that seemed to dance and change continuously. Nara felt a cold hand grip her heart as she looked around. There were other figures present within this realm, shadows moving silently against the pulsing backdrop of the Nexus. They seemed to be watching them intently, their forms blurring between human and something far more sinister. "Who are these creatures?" Nara asked, her voice barely a whisper in the eerie quiet of the chamber. "They are guardians," Saphira replied, her voice echoing faintly despite the silence. "Guardians of the Nexus and its secrets, and they will not be pleased by our intrusion." The shadows coalesced into forms that were both terrifying and fascinating, half man, half beast hybrids with features that looked like they had been torn from nightmares. Their eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce through the darkness, burning holes in Nara's consciousness. "Why are you here?" one of them asked, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. "We seek understanding," Saphira replied calmly, her body radiating an aura of confidence and authority. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge." The Guardian's eyes narrowed slightly as it considered Saphira's words. Then, with a sudden shift, its form began to change, morphing into a more humanoid shape. "Your intentions may be pure," the creature said finally, "but you tread on forbidden ground." "What secrets are kept here?" Nara asked, her curiosity getting the better of her despite the danger. "The Nexus holds knowledge beyond your comprehension," the Guardian replied cryptically. "It is the source of all magic and darkness, both creation and destruction. To know its secrets is to court ultimate power or ultimate ruin." Saphira's eyes flickered with a mixture of awe and fear. "Can you guide us through this place?" she asked, her voice soft but commanding. The guardian hesitated for a moment, as if considering the request carefully. "It can be done," it said finally, "but you must swear an oath to handle its knowledge with care." "Of course," Saphira nodded immediately, her tone unwavering. "We will not misuse what we learn here." The guardian seemed satisfied with this answer, its form shifting once more as if preparing to act as a guide. But even as they took their first step towards deeper parts of the nexus, Saphira's eyes flickered with doubt. "What are you hiding?" she asked the guardian, her voice sharp and commanding. "Why are you so wary of us?" The guardian paused, its form seeming to tense slightly. "Not all knowledge is meant for mortals," it said cryptically. "Some secrets belong only to the nexus itself." "Then what of our journey here?" Saphira pressed, a sense of urgency growing in her voice. "Is there something more you need from us?" The guardian's eyes glowed even brighter, and its form shifted again, a closer approximation of the humanoid figure. "There is one task," it said finally, speaking with deliberate slowness, as if weighing each word. "A challenge that must be met." "What is this challenge?" Nara asked, her heart pounding in anticipation and fear. The guardian's eyes flickered towards Saphira, and its form shifted once more, blurring into a shadowy silhouette. "A test of worthiness," it said, almost as if the words were being torn from its lips against its will. "Only those worthy can pass through this place without bringing ruin." Saphira's eyes narrowed, her scales shifting slightly in response to the guardian's ominous statement. "What kind of test?" she asked, trying to keep her tone calm despite the unease growing within her. The guardian hesitated once more, as if struggling with itself. "A choice," it said finally. "A choice between your desires and your true path." "What does that mean?" Nara whispered, looking from Saphira to the shadowy guardian, confusion and apprehension clouding her mind. "Some journeys are not for the faint of heart," the guardian said, its voice dripping with meaning. "And some truths are not for the unworthy." Saphira's eyes darkened as she processed the guardian's words. "What must we do?" she asked finally, her voice steady but strained. The guardian seemed to consider this question deeply, its form wavering slightly, as if battling an unseen force within it. Then, with a final shift, it seemed to solidify into a more clear form, a humanoid figure with strange, otherworldly features. Its eyes glowed brightly, and it spoke in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "You must face your greatest fear," it said finally, "and choose to follow your true path." "What is my greatest fear?" Saphira asked, her voice steady but filled with a sense of foreboding. The guardian's eyes glowed even brighter, and its form began to shift once more, blurring into a shapeless shadow that seemed to echo Nara's earlier question about what they were hiding. "It is within you," it said cryptically, "and it is the key to your fate." Saphira's eyes narrowed slightly, her scales flickering as if in response to this challenge. "Then show me," she said finally, her voice firm, but tinged with an undercurrent of apprehension. With those words, the guardian's form shifted again, a blurring transition into a dark, shadowy void that seemed to pull them in. Nara felt a sudden chill as the darkness enveloped them, and the chamber around them began to fade. The guardian's voice echoed faintly within this void, guiding them deeper into its mysteries. "You must confront what you fear most," it said, its voice reverberating through the darkness, "and choose your path wisely." As they stepped further into the dark void, the air grew colder and more oppressive. Nara could feel the weight of Saphira's scales pressing against her as they moved forward, each step bringing them closer to an unseen confrontation. The guardian's words continued to echo within her mind, a haunting reminder of the challenge ahead. "What do you fear most?" the guardian's voice asked again, this time within her consciousness rather than through any physical form. "Face it head on and choose your path." Nara's heart pounded as she tried to comprehend the weight of these words. What was Saphira's greatest fear, and what did it mean for their journey? Saphira turned to face Nara, her eyes glowing brightly under the shadowy void surrounding them. "You see everything," she said softly, almost as if addressing this question to Nara alone. And you must choose. Nara took a deep breath, the weight of this responsibility sinking into her bones. What was it that Saphira feared most? It had to be something fundamental to their connection, something that threatened both their survival and their purpose. Saphira, Nara said softly, her voice steady, but filled with an undercurrent of emotion. What do you fear? The dragon's eyes flickered, a mixture of fear and determination warring within them. Abandonment, she replied finally, her voice soft but resolute. The fear that I will be left behind. Nara's heart clenched at these words. The idea that Saphira might face such a fate was almost unbearable, but the guardian's words echoed in her mind. Confront it head on and choose your path. Then we one no longer walk alone, Nara said firmly, placing a hand on Saphira's shoulder. We face this Tojith. Saphira's eyes softened slightly, and her body seemed to relax marginally under the reassurance of their connection. But the guardian's voice spoke once more within the void, its words cutting through the moment of warmth. You must choose, it said firmly. What is your true path? Nara's gaze met Saphira's, and for a moment, she could see the struggle within the dragon's eyes. The fear of abandonment, but also the yearning for something deeper, a bond that transcended the physical and the mundane. Together, Nara said firmly, this path is ours to face together. Saphira's eyes flickered again, and her body seemed to shift slightly under the weight of this decision. Then so be it, she replied finally, her voice steady but filled with a sense of resolve. As they stepped forward into the next phase of their journey, the void around them shifted once more, revealing a new landscape that was both familiar and foreign. The air here was thick with a strange energy, a mixture of magic and something far more ancient and dark. Strange symbols and runes flickered on the walls of this chamber, glowing with a faint light that seemed to dance and change continuously. What lies beyond? Nara whispered once more, her voice trembling but filled with intrigue. The guardian's form shifted one last time, becoming a shadowy silhouette that pointed towards an opening in the wall ahead. Your path, it said cryptically. Follow it. As they approached the opening, Nara could feel the weight of this moment pressing down upon them. Whatever lay beyond was no longer just a mystery, it was a challenge that would define their journey and their bond. And with that thought, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Just as Nara and Saphira stepped through the opening in the wall, the chamber beyond burst into a sudden chaos of light and sound. They found themselves in a place unlike anything either of them had ever seen before, an intricate network of glowing crystals, floating islands, and shifting landscapes that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. What in the gods? Nara breathed, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, making it hard to keep track of their footing as they tried to navigate the strange new terrain. Saphira's scales flickered, reflecting the strange light around them. This is the core, she murmured, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. The heart of the nexus, where all the energies converge. Suddenly, a figure emerged from one of the shifting landscapes, a being unlike any they had encountered before. It was humanoid in shape, but seemed to be made entirely of light, its form shimmering and changing constantly, as if it were a living piece of art. Greetings, travelers, the figure said in a voice that resonated through their minds rather than their ears. I am Nara, guardian of this realm. Nara stepped back slightly, feeling overwhelmed by the presence of this being. Saphira's eyes narrowed as she studied Nara, her body tensing in readiness for whatever might come next. Why have you brought us here? Saphira asked, her voice steady but filled with a sense of urgency. Nara's form shifted slightly, a calm smile playing on its featureless face. To reveal the truth, it said cryptically, the true nature of this journey. Saphira's eyes widened slightly at these words. The true nature of their journey? What did Nara mean by that? Reveal what truth? Nara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nara's form seemed to glow brighter for a moment, as if amplifying its presence within this strange realm. "The truth about the Nexus," it said finally, "and your roles in shaping it." Nara's heart raced at these words. What did it or Nara mean by their roles? Did they truly have a part to play in the workings of this ancient place? Saphira's eyes flickered with understanding and fear. "You're saying we're not just travelers here," she murmured, her voice filled with an undercurrent of dread. Nara's form shifted once more, becoming almost liquid, like as if it was adapting to the weight of these revelations. "Exactly," it said finally. "You are a part of the Nexus now. Your actions will shape its future." Nara and Saphira exchanged a look, both feeling the weight of this revelation press down upon them. They were not just intruders in this place, they were integral to its continued existence. "And what if we don't want that role?" Saphira asked finally, her voice filled with a sense of determination. "What if we choose another path?" Nara's form seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if considering the implications of this question. Then, with a sudden shift, it became more solid, a humanoid figure standing tall before them. "Choice, Eater," Nara said finally, its voice echoing through their minds. "You always have the choice, but remember the Nexus shapes you always have the choice." The alien woman, her voice a whispered echo of reality, broke the silence. He had stretched between them like a taut wire. She stepped closer, her skin shimmering with an ethereal glow that cast soft luminescence around the room. Her eyes were pools of starlight, deep and full of secrets she hadn't yet shared. "I have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promised him." She turned away, moving towards the window where the light was filtering through, casting an intricate dance of shadows on the floor. He watched her back, her graceful silhouette standing against the dawn, and felt his heart twist painfully in his chest. "Why do you stay?" she asked without turning around, as if she could feel his confusion, his pain. "If there is no choice but to leave, why?" "I want to be with you," he said fiercely, stepping forward. "I want to understand." She halted, her shoulders lifting slightly under the weight of his words. Turning slowly, her gaze found his again, and for a moment, everything stilled around them. "I have no home to offer but stars," she confessed softly, eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation or doubt. "I cannot give you the life you know." Her admission hung in the air like an unspoken promise. She was offering him everything and nothing at once, her truth, her heart, but the uncertainty of what lay beyond. He took a step closer, their distance narrowing to a mere breath. "I am not asking for your home," he said gently, reaching out tentatively as if he were afraid to touch her. "Just you." Her breath caught, and she hesitated. She leaned into his hand when it brushed her cheek, her body trembling slightly against his fingertips. It was an intimate connection that transcended words, a moment of raw vulnerability where all barriers dropped away. "Is that enough?" she asked quietly, voice tinged with desperation and hope. His heart swelled within him, and he nodded, unable to find the words to express everything he felt. Not enough for her, perhaps, but more than he ever dared dream of having again. She stepped into his embrace then, fitting perfectly against his chest, as if they were meant to be together in this moment forever. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, inhaling her scent, a mixture of starlight and forgotten galaxies. For a moment, they stood there under the soft glow of dawn, holding on to each other with everything they had left. The world outside faded into insignificance as they became entwined in their own personal constellation, shining brightly but still unknown to others. Then suddenly, she stepped back, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Please," she whispered urgently, "do not forget this place. Do not forget me." He could only nod, heart aching but also filled with resolve. She was right. There were things he hadn't yet understood about what it meant to choose freedom, to walk away from everything known in pursuit of something greater. But he also knew now that love was its own kind of universe, infinite and ever shifting. "Promise me," she urged desperately. "I will wait for you, but only if this is truly your choice." His eyes searched hers, finding the same fierce hope battling against doubt and fear. He understood her understood the depth of her longing, and the terrible beauty of her sacrifice. This was his moment to choose, not just for himself, but for her as well. "I promise," he whispered solemnly. "I will come back." Her expression softened, relief washing over her features like a sudden rainstorm after weeks of drought. She took another step towards him, her hands reaching up to rest on either side of his face, thumbs brushing across his cheekbones in a tender touch. "Then go," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "And no, I will always be here." She closed the distance between them, her lips gently meeting his in a kiss that tasted like starlight and secrets. It was brief, but oh so full of everything they felt: hope, fear, longing, love. And as she pulled away, leaving behind the faintest whisper of breath against his lips, he knew this moment would forever define him. The universe stretched out before them, vast and unknown. But for now, all that mattered was the promise they shared, one that bound them not by chains, but by threads of light. And with that final kiss still lingering on his lips, he turned and left the room, each step carrying him further into the unknown. Behind him, the door shut quietly, sealing their private universe within its walls. But nothing could seal the bond they now shared. It was as eternal as the stars themselves. And a single drop of rain, lingering on the edge of a leaf, seemed to hang there forever before finally falling with a soft plop onto the concrete below. The sound echoed through the silent streets, punctuating the gloom that had settled over the city. It was as if nature itself was mourning, echoing the emotions trapped inside the hearts of every resident. Elliot moved silently down the alleyway, his feet barely making contact with the ground as he made his way towards the old warehouse. On the outskirts of town, the place was supposed to be abandoned, but Elliot had a knack for finding places that were off the beaten path. This particular spot held the promise of something more, something that could break the monotony of his life. He pushed open the rusted door and stepped inside. Inside, the warehouse was as he remembered it, dark and foreboding, with remnants of past activity scattered about. There was an air of danger and potential here, a place where secrets and mysteries lay hidden in the shadows. Elliot's heart raced at the thought of what he might discover. His eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light, tracing the outlines of various objects around him. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling his muscles relax as he began to explore. He made his way through a maze of crates and discarded machinery until he reached a section that seemed untouched by time. Here, amidst the dust and debris, lay an old book with an intricate golden embossing on its cover. The title, "The Chronicles of Forgotten Realms," glowed faintly in the dim light. Elliot's fingers trembled slightly as he opened it to find the pages filled with detailed illustrations and cryptic writings that hinted at ancient lore. As he immersed himself in the text, Elliot felt his mind expand, absorbing each word like a sponge. The stories within spoke of a world where magic was not just a legend, but a way of life, where beings of extraordinary power walked among humans, shaping destinies and protecting the balance between the seen and unseen realms. It filled him with a strange sense of belonging, an understanding that perhaps, somewhere out there, he too had a place in this mythical tapestry. Hours passed as Elliot read, the rain outside turning to a light drizzle, then to mist. He emerged from his trance-like state only when exhaustion began to creep in, forcing him to acknowledge the passage of time. It was late now. The streets would be empty, save for the occasional night owl or stray cat. With a reluctant sigh, he closed the book and carefully placed it back on its shelf amidst the forgotten relics. As he turned to leave, a faint glow caught his eye. He squinted in the dark, trying to make out what it was. It was a small pendant hanging from an old chain, embedded deep within a cracked stone wall, and it bore the same symbol as the book's cover, emblem of forgotten realms. Curiosity piqued, Elliot approached and tried to pry the pendant free. After several minutes of careful work, he managed to extract it. The moment it was loose, he felt a sudden surge of energy run through his body. Colors burst behind his eyelids, his senses heightened, and everything around him seemed more vivid than before. Breathing heavily, Elliot held the pendant in his palm, staring at it in awe. With the newfound awareness came a nagging sense of urgency. Elliot knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to make use of this unexpected gift. Picking up his pace, he left the warehouse and made his way towards the heart of the city. The streets were eerily quiet now, but the sense of possibility kept him moving forward. His destination was Clurth Old Tower near the riverfront, a place steeped in mystery and forgotten history. Reaching the base of the tower, Elliot hesitated for a moment. Was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? The thought of facing the unknown alone was daunting, but the pendant seemed to pulse with encouragement, urging him to proceed. Drawing in a deep breath, he began to climb the winding stairs that spiraled upwards into darkness. The higher he climbed, the more tangible the energy around him became. Shadows seemed to whisper secrets and stories from long ago. Elliot's heart raced, not just from the physical exertion, but also from the excitement of unlocking truths hidden for generations. At last, he reached the top of the tower and paused at the entrance to a small room that glowed faintly with an inner light. Inside, shelves lined with ancient scrolls and artifacts greeted him. In the center of the room stood an old, cracked mirror on a pedestal. Elliot felt drawn to it. There was something oddly familiar about the reflection staring back at him. As he reached out to touch the glass, visions began to flash before his eyes, images of battles, alliances, and fateful decisions that would shape the destiny of two worlds. With trembling fingers, he traced the outline of his own face in the mirror, feeling a deep connection form between him and the echoes of past heroes. It was as if he was being prepared for a greater purpose, one that transcended mere mortal existence. The weight of this realization settled heavily upon him. He understood now why the pendant chose him. He was not just an observer in this saga, but a participant, destined to play his part in a cosmic drama. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Elliot stepped back from the mirror and let the visions fade. With renewed resolve, he left the tower and walked out into the dawning sky, ready to embrace whatever awaited him. The world was shifting, and with it, so was Elliot's place within it. The day promised challenges and discoveries, but also the hope of adventure and transformation.